During our family vacation in Hilton Head, I was told to sit at a separate table. No one spoke to me. Not during dinner, not during breakfast, not during any group activity. When I turned to my husband Ethan, the man who had vowed to stand beside me, and asked, "Why?" he simply shrugged and said, "That's their way." I smiled, though something inside me cracked. "Perfect," I said, "because I have my way too." The next morning, the resort would find itself in chaos, and none of them would see it coming. But that wasn't the beginning of the story. The beginning was quieter, softer, more foolish. Just a few days earlier, Ethan had told me about the trip. "My parents are organizing a family vacation to Hilton Head," he said. "It'll be good for us. White sand, ocean air, some time to bond." I smiled. Maybe I smiled too quickly, because I wanted so badly to believe this time would be different, even though Margaret, my mother-in-law, had always looked at me like I didn't quite fit, even though Charles, Ethan's father, referred to me in the third person, as if I weren't there, even though every family gathering made me feel like a guest instead of a wife. Still, I had hoped. I told myself that if I kept trying, if I was patient, they would eventually let me in. Maybe the problem was me. I was too reserved, not warm enough, not quite what they expected. Maybe I needed to earn their acceptance. That kind of thinking, I now realize, is dangerous. It makes you believe disrespect is just a phase to endure, that love requires suffering. It doesn't. The resort was stunning. Everything you'd imagine a perfect beach vacation to be. Whitewashed buildings, palm trees, ocean breeze, the sound of waves just beyond the windows. I stood on the balcony of our suite and thought, maybe this time will be different. Maybe they'll sit with me. Maybe they'll talk. Maybe I'll finally belong. That night, we went to dinner at one of the resort's restaurants. A long table was already prepared for the family. I walked with Ethan, thinking we'd sit together. But just as I reached for a seat beside him, Charles shook his head and said, "There's been a mistake. She needs her own table." For a moment, I thought he was joking. I laughed nervously and asked, "Excuse me?" Margaret didn't even look up. She just said, "It's how we do things." I looked at Ethan, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for him to speak up, to say something, anything. But he sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and muttered, "It's just their way." So I sat down, alone, at a small table set off to the side, not quite part of the family, but not far enough to leave unnoticed. I picked at my food, pretending not to hear their laughter or see the way Margaret refilled everyone's glass but mine. I should have left that night. I should have walked out of that restaurant, packed my things, and booked the next flight home, but I didn't. I told myself maybe it was just some bizarre family tradition, something they did once and then got over. I wanted to believe that the next morning things would be different, that I'd be included, that Ethan would stand up for me, that I wouldn't feel so much like a shadow hovering outside someone else's vacation. But deep down, a small voice whispered the truth I didn't want to hear. I had never truly been a part of their family. And Ethan, he had never been on my side. The next morning, I woke up early. I wore the soft floral maxi dress Ethan once said made me look like I belonged near the ocean. I texted him before heading down to the hotel restaurant. "You up? I'm heading down for breakfast. Meet you there?" No response. I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was still sleeping. Maybe I'd see the whole family already seated and they'd wave me over, smiling, like everything had been a misunderstanding. That was still my hope. That it had all been one strange, awkward tradition they'd soon abandon. That today, they'd remember I existed. But when I arrived, the dining room was nearly empty. I walked the main floor, scanned the beachside terrace. Nothing. I began pacing around the resort, checking the poolside cafe, the lobby bar, even the private garden. Still nothing. For nearly half an hour, I wandered, heart slowly sinking into my stomach, until I turned a corner and saw them. They were already seated at a large table by the window, laughing, chatting, passing around plates of food and sipping mimosas. Their vacation was well underway, and I wasn't in it. I approached the table, confused but trying not to show it. "Why didn't anyone tell me you were coming down?" I asked, forcing a smile. Charles barely looked up from his plate. "We assumed you'd figure it out." Margaret, without missing a beat, took another sip of her coffee. "It's just how we do things." I looked to Ethan, my husband, the one person who was supposed to make this trip make sense. He was chewing, nodding along with something his father had just said. He didn't even acknowledge me. That was the moment something shifted. Not with them, they had always been this way. The shift was in me. I realized with a clarity that chilled me to the bone that I was not part of their family. I never had been. And Ethan? He wasn't on my side. He never had been either. The rest of the trip followed the same miserable pattern. Every breakfast, I sat alone. Every group activity happened without me. One afternoon, they went on a private boat tour. I only found out when I saw the pictures Claire posted on Instagram, photos of them smiling, drinks in hand, as the sun set behind the sail. Another night, they dressed up for a wine tasting event. I saw them in the lobby, walking out in coordinated outfits, laughing. I had just come down for a walk on the beach. No one had said a word. Later, I asked Ethan, "Why didn't you text me?" I tried to keep my voice even, calm, like I wasn't unraveling inside. He sighed and gave me the same answer as always. "It's just their way." That phrase became poison. Every time he said it, it felt like another door slamming in my face. I wasn't his partner. I wasn't even a guest. I was an afterthought, a decorative accessory, silently tolerated but never embraced. By the fourth day, I stopped trying. I stopped waiting for a seat at their table or an invitation to their outings. If they wanted me to be invisible, fine. I would be invisible. But what they didn't know was that I had been paying attention. I had been watching. And I had power they didn't realize. Because while they made me sit at my own table, they didn't know whose name was on the reservation. They didn't realize who had booked the rooms, who had reserved the rental car, who had paid for the spa treatments, the dinners, the wine tours. Every plan they cherished, every moment they had carefully crafted for this perfect vacation, all of it had my name on it. And I had just decided it was time to remind them. That night, while Margaret, Charles, and Ethan were likely raising their glasses at some fancy dinner I wasn't invited to, I was back in the hotel room, alone, but not broken. Not anymore. I had opened my laptop and logged into my email, scanning the long list of reservation confirmations. Because while they were busy pretending I didn't exist, they had forgotten one important detail. I had booked everything. The hotel, reserved under my name. The rental car, my credit card. The dinner at the waterfront restaurant Charles had been bragging about for weeks? My account. The spa day Margaret had circled in her planner and mentioned at least 5 times in our group chat? Also mine. They wanted me separate? Fine. I'd go one better. I'd remove myself entirely, and I'd take their perfect vacation down with me. Click by click, I started to dismantle it all. First, the hotel rooms. Cancellation confirmed. Next, the rental car. Gone. Dinner reservation? Deleted. Spa appointments? Canceled, politely and firmly. Each time I clicked, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Not out of revenge. Not really. It was more like liberation. I wasn't erasing their plans. I was reclaiming myself from them. Then I packed my bag. Just the essentials. I didn't even take the dress Ethan had given me on our first anniversary. It suddenly felt too heavy with meaning. I rolled up my clothes, zipped the suitcase, and walked out of the room without a sound. The rental car, Margaret once complained it wasn't luxurious enough, became my getaway vehicle. I drove through the night, the windows down, the air salty and cool, my playlist on shuffle, Charleston glowing faintly on the horizon. By the time they were clinking glasses and laughing about another perfect family evening, I was unlocking the door to a luxury suite overlooking the water. I had booked it in minutes on my phone. No drama, no discussion. Just me, my card, and a new start. Room service brought me grilled fish and a chilled glass of white wine. I curled up on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the waves roll in and out. For the first time since the trip began, I felt peace. Not happiness, not yet, but clarity. I had been chasing their approval like it was oxygen, and now, sitting there alone, I realized I'd been suffocating all along. The next morning, I woke to the sound of waves instead of silence. I made coffee, opened the balcony doors wide, and let the morning air fill the room. Then the phone started vibrating. Ethan, Margaret, Charles. Then Ethan again. I smiled and flipped the phone to silent. They had noticed. I pictured the scene in Hilton Head, Charles opening his door only to be met by a hotel manager saying the reservation had been canceled. Margaret stretching and scrolling through her phone, seeing an inbox full of cancellation notices. Ethan, groggy, confused, rubbing his temples as the realization dawned on him and his mother's voice escalated from confusion to fury. No rooms, no car, no dinner, no spa, no wife. Just them, stranded in the fantasy they had built without me, and I had finally, completely stepped out of it. I sat on the balcony of my suite in Charleston, legs propped up, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand. The waves rolled in and out like a slow drumbeat. That morning felt still and clean, like something had been scrubbed out of me. I hadn't felt that kind of peace in years. Then the phone started buzzing. Again. Ethan. Margaret. Charles. Ethan again. I watched it ring, let it vibrate against the wooden table. Then I turned it to silent and smiled into my coffee. They had finally noticed. I pictured the chaos. Charles stepping out of bed only to find a hotel manager at his door, telling him there was an issue with the reservation. Margaret rolling over, expecting her carefully curated spa schedule, only to see a flood of cancellation emails. Ethan rubbing his temples as he watched his parents unravel. No rooms, no car, no plan, and no me. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clean, precise. This was not revenge. This was correction. By the time I scrolled through the messages, there were dozens. Where are you? What the hell is going on? You need to fix this now. And then, for fun more than anything else, I picked up his next call. Where are you? Ethan snapped the second I answered. Charleston. A pause. Charleston? What the hell are you doing there? Enjoying my morning. I sipped my coffee. The breeze brushed my hair back. In the background, I could hear Margaret yelling at the hotel staff, Charles swearing under his breath. You canceled everything, Ethan said, his voice lower now, like he still couldn't believe it. Yes. A sharp inhale. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents have nowhere to stay. We had plans. You left us stranded. Oh, no, I said, my voice dripping with mock concern. That must be so uncomfortable for you. Silence. Heavy. Loaded. I leaned back in my chair. You all wanted me separate, so I gave you what you wanted. This is insane, he muttered. You need to come back. I laughed, a full, clean laugh. No, Ethan, I really don't. And I hung up. Later, I found out just how badly things had gone. With the resort fully booked, they had to scramble for another place. Ended up at a dingy roadside motel 20 minutes away. Flickering lights, that damp, moldy air that never quite goes away. No rental car meant they had to Uber everywhere. And Hilton Head? Not exactly known for its abundance of rideshare drivers. Surge pricing gouged them hard. Charles's highly anticipated waterfront dinner? Canceled. Fully booked now. They ended up at a loud tourist trap surrounded by screaming children and microwaved seafood. Margaret threw a full tantrum at the spa when she found out her appointment was gone. She demanded they fit her in anyway. They didn't. I got all of this from the string of angry texts Ethan sent me later. You seriously left us like this? Mom is furious. She was humiliated at the spa. Dad is losing his mind over dinner. I hope you're happy. I was. I thought that would be the end of it. A little discomfort. A dose of their own medicine. But then, something unexpected happened. Another message buzzed through, this time from Claire, Ethan's cousin. Hey, just wanted to say, I heard what happened. Honestly? Good for you. I blinked. Claire and I had always gotten along fine, but we weren't close. Wait, what do you mean? I replied. Her answer made my stomach drop. They did the same thing to Ethan's ex-wife. I sat straight up. His ex-wife? Ethan had told me his first marriage ended because they grew apart. Nothing dramatic, no big betrayal, just life. I had never questioned it. What do you mean? I asked. Claire replied. They went on a family trip, treated her like garbage, made her sit alone, ignored her. She left halfway through, filed for divorce a month later. I froze. My heart pounded. I figured you knew, Claire added, but now I realize. He never told you, did he? No, he hadn't. Because if he had, I never would have gone on that trip. If he had, I would have known this wasn't some awkward family quirk. This was a pattern. And Ethan, he knew exactly what would happen, and he let it happen anyway. I sat frozen on the balcony, Claire's message staring up at me from the screen like a trapdoor opening beneath my feet. They did the same thing to Ethan's ex-wife. I couldn't look away. I'd known something was off, yes. I'd felt the cruelty, the exclusion, the condescending tone Margaret used like second nature. But this was no accident, no awkward tradition. This was a pattern, a deliberate system, and I was simply the next name on the list. I typed, hands trembling. His ex-wife? What are you talking about? Claire responded almost immediately. Jessica, they went on a trip, treated her like garbage, sat her at a separate table, ignored her, made her feel like she didn't belong. She left halfway through and filed for divorce a month later. The room swayed a little. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, as if steadying myself against a wave I hadn't seen coming. He never told me, I wrote back. I figured you knew, Claire said. But seeing what happened with you, I realized he kept it from you too. Too. That word echoed in my ears. Too. I wasn't the first woman Ethan watched get eaten alive by his family. I was just the next one he led to the slaughter. I stared at the phone, thoughts colliding and collapsing. Ethan had always said his first marriage just didn't work out, that they grew apart. He had never mentioned a trip, never mentioned Jessica being mistreated, never hinted that any of what I was going through had happened before. He made her sound dramatic, overly sensitive, someone who, according to him, never gave his family a chance. He lied. He knew exactly what would happen, and he let it happen again. He let it happen to me. The phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time, it wasn't Claire. It was an unknown number. Ma'am, this is Officer Daniels with the Hilton Head Police Department. We need to speak with you regarding a missing persons report filed by your husband. I shot to my feet, heart racing. I called back immediately, my voice high and tight. I'm not missing, I said. I'm fine. I'm in Charleston. I left by choice. Ethan knows where I am. A pause. Then the officer said, Ma'am, are you confirming that you left voluntarily and are not in danger? Yes, I said firmly. Absolutely. My husband has been calling me nonstop. This isn't about safety. He's trying to manipulate me. Another pause. Then the officer said, Would you like to file a formal request for no further contact? I hesitated. That moment, one single breath, was the final tether between me and everything I had tried so hard to protect. The marriage, the appearances, the part of me that still wanted to believe Ethan had meant well. I exhaled. Yes, I would. Just like that, I placed the first legal nail in the coffin of my marriage. Not even an hour later, the messages started again. This time, from Margaret. I can't believe you would humiliate us like this. I laughed out loud. You made Ethan involve the police. Do you know how this makes our family look? Oh, I made him do that? I rolled my eyes and took another sip of coffee. This family has done nothing but try to welcome you. You're being incredibly selfish. You need to come back and fix this. And then the last one, the one that chilled me. If you don't come back, Ethan is going to make things very difficult for you. I stopped breathing for a second, not because I was scared, though I probably should have been, but because I realized something horrifying. This wasn't just about control anymore. It was a threat. I read the message again, slowly. Ethan is going to make things very difficult for you. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Suddenly, it all clicked. The isolation, the silence, the false stories about Jessica, the family's united front. The moment I stopped playing nice, the masks came off. This wasn't awkward family culture. This was a game, a test, a war, and I wasn't supposed to fight back, but I would. I cracked my knuckles, took a deep breath, and sent one simple reply. Perfect. Let him try. Then I booked a conference room in my hotel and sent out 4 invitations to Ethan, to Margaret, to Charles, and to Claire, because if they wanted to escalate this, I'd bring the war straight to their doorstep. The next morning, the hotel conference room I'd reserved was cold and still. The long wooden table stretched out in front of me like a battleground. No flowers, no refreshments, just bottled water and silence. I sat at the head, calm and composed. I had nothing to fear anymore, nothing to prove. I wasn't here to make peace. I was here to end the war they started. The door burst open. Ethan stormed in first, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Margaret followed close behind, her heels stabbing the floor like punctuation. Charles trudged in, already red in the face. And finally, Claire stepped through, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She gave me a slight nod. I had no idea if she was here as a witness, a mediator, or just for the drama. "What the hell is this?" Ethan barked. I smiled slowly. "A conversation. You wanted to talk so badly, so here we are." Charles scoffed, folding his arms. "You think this little stunt is funny?" "No," I said evenly. "I think it's pathetic. I think you people play sick little games with the women in your family, and this time, you picked the wrong one." Margaret narrowed her eyes. "You abandoned us." I actually laughed. "I abandoned you? That's rich coming from the people who spent an entire vacation pretending I didn't exist." Ethan slammed his palm against the back of a chair. "You're blowing this out of proportion." That was the moment I snapped. I slammed both hands on the table. The sound echoed off the walls. Margaret flinched. "I am your wife," I said, voice cold and sharp. "Not a stranger. Not some outsider you get to exile to her own table like a child. I am your wife, and you let them treat me like nothing." I turned to Ethan. "And you knew this wasn't the first time. You knew exactly what they were doing, and you let it happen anyway." His face paled. Margaret jumped in, her voice high and strained. "We were just following tradition." "No," I snapped. "It's not tradition. It's control. It's a test. And every single woman who enters this family fails it, because the game is rigged." Ethan shook his head. "You're overreacting." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the messages from Emily, Jessica's sister, and tossed it onto the table in front of him. "Read it." He hesitated. "Read it," I repeated. Slowly, Ethan picked up the phone and began scrolling. I watched his jaw tighten, his lips thin, his fingers twitch. When he reached the end, he dropped the phone like it had burned him. "This isn't proof of anything," Charles muttered. "Just some old gossip." I turned to Margaret. "Then explain this." I looked her dead in the eye. "You sent me a message last night. You said, and I quote, 'If you don't come back, Ethan is going to make things very difficult for you.' That wasn't a plea. That was a threat." Her mouth snapped shut. Claire let out a low whistle. "Wow." Ethan turned to his mother. "You said that?" Margaret stiffened. "I was trying to make her understand." "Understand what?" Ethan's voice rose. "That you've been doing this to every woman I've ever brought home? That you did the same thing to Jessica?" Charles shifted uncomfortably. Margaret shot him a warning look, but it was too late. The damage was done. I saw it then, clear as day. The crack in Ethan's carefully crafted loyalty to his parents. He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw hesitation, doubt, even guilt. Finally. But then he ran a hand through his hair and said, "I can fix this." My stomach sank. That was his instinct. Not to apologize, not to show regret, but to fix the optics. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said softly. Silence. I stood, adjusting the strap on my bag. "I'm not coming back, Ethan." His eyes widened. "Wait. You're serious?" Claire snorted. "Dude, how have you not figured that out by now?" Margaret's voice rose. "This is ridiculous! You're throwing away your marriage over a misunderstanding." "No, Margaret," I said, shaking my head. "You threw it away. You and Charles, with your twisted idea of what family means. And Ethan? He was just too weak to stop it. Ethan reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Wait, let's talk about this. I held up a hand. You talk. You make excuses. You let them control you. But I'm done listening. I walked toward the door. Where are you going? Ethan called, desperate now. I turned one last time, my voice low and even. I'm leaving, Margaret scoffed. You can't just leave a marriage. I looked her straight in the eye. Watch me. And then I walked out the door. The divorce took 6 months. 6 months of lawyers' emails, half-hearted apologies, dramatic texts from Ethan, and guilt-tripping nonsense from Margaret. You're tearing this family apart. Ethan is devastated. You've destroyed him. No one's perfect, but you're the one who walked away. I didn't reply to a single message. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I just felt done, like I had finally closed a book that had been draining me for years. Claire stayed in touch. She told me what happened after I left. Apparently, Ethan finally confronted his parents, for the first time in his life. Margaret cried. Charles called him weak, said I had brainwashed him. But it didn't matter. Not to me. I was already gone. I moved to Charleston permanently, rented a small apartment with big windows and ocean light, started doing interior design consulting again, something I'd given up during the marriage. Slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt a life that actually belonged to me. I stopped checking the clock in the morning for Ethan's messages. I stopped waiting for a family to include me. I stopped choosing clothes based on what Margaret would approve of, or smiling politely while Charles made snide remarks. I wore what I loved, ate what I liked, and said exactly what I meant. One night, months later, I received a text from an unknown number. The words were short, simple. I see it now. I'm sorry. Ethan, I stared at it for a long time. Not out of rage or longing, but out of recognition. This was closure for him, not me. I didn't need it. I deleted the message without responding, because for the first time in years I was free. And I realized freedom didn't come from being accepted by someone else's family. It didn't come from someone choosing me. It came from me choosing myself. Now, when people ask why I left my marriage, I don't go into detail. I just smile and say, because they gave me my own table. Sometimes when a woman sits alone at a restaurant, it's not because she's lonely. It's because she's finally learned to walk away from any place that no longer makes room for her. And that's the beginning of everything.